The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt outside the precinct, the kind of dull, gray light that promised nothing new. Officer Ray Collins sipped his bitter coffee and leaned against his patrol car, scanning the lot with the same bored vigilance he'd worn for years. It was a slow morning. No calls, no rush, just the sound of tires crunching over gravel and the occasional hum of distant traffic. He'd been a cop for over 2 decades. He'd seen neighborhoods rise and fall, good men quit, bad ones promoted, and the city change in ways he didn't always understand. Ray liked to think he was part of the old guard, the ones who kept order before the world went soft. He wasn't cruel, at least not in his own eyes. He just believed people needed to know their place. He took another sip of his coffee, grimacing. The new recruits these days, fresh out of college, quoting policy manuals and talking about community relations. He missed the old days when a badge meant authority, not compromise. He spat into the dust beside his car, adjusted his sunglasses, and noticed a sleek black sedan pull into the chief's reserved parking spot. The car was too clean, too polished, definitely not a cop's ride. The man who stepped out wasn't one of them either. Tall, fit, dressed in a tailored navy suit that caught the morning light. His shoes gleamed. He moved with quiet confidence, not the hurried stiffness of someone out of place. Ray frowned. Civilians didn't park there. No one did. He walked toward the man with a deliberate pace, his boots striking the pavement in sharp, controlled beats. "Excuse me," he barked, his tone halfway between command and irritation. "That spot's reserved for command staff. You can't park here." The man turned, calm and composed. His eyes were dark, steady, not confrontational, just observant. "I'm aware," he said politely. "I believe I'm in the right place." Something about that answer irritated Ray. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Too calm, too confident, like he didn't need to explain himself. Ray stepped closer, invading the man's space just enough to assert control. "I don't care what you believe, sir," he said, emphasizing the last word with a slight sneer. "You move that car, or I'll have it towed. Simple as that." The man regarded him quietly for a moment, then glanced toward the station entrance. "I have an appointment," he said evenly. "Perhaps you should check with your captain before making assumptions." Ray's jaw tightened. He'd had enough of these types. Businessmen, lawyers, politicians, people who thought they were above the rules. "Listen," Ray said, his voice lowering to that dangerous, weary drawl of a man who'd used intimidation more times than he could count. "I don't care if you're meeting the mayor. You don't park here. Move the car." He could see the flicker of tension in the man's jaw, but there was still no fear. That calm expression was infuriating. Ray stepped closer again, his breath mixing with the cold morning air between them. "What's the matter?" he said mockingly. "You can't read the signs." The man didn't flinch. He just looked at Ray, steady, unshaken, like he was watching something far beneath him. And something inside Ray snapped. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the way the man looked at him, without anger, without submission, just quiet dignity. It made Ray feel small, and he hated that feeling. He spat on the ground near the man's polished shoes, the dark stain spreading across the concrete. "Next time," he said sharply, "pay attention to where you are." For a moment, the air was utterly still. The man's expression didn't change. No anger, no outrage, just a long, measured silence. Then, with a voice calm enough to chill the air, he said, "You have a good morning, officer." He turned and walked toward the entrance of the precinct without another word, the sound of his footsteps echoing off the concrete. Ray watched him go, feeling a strange twinge in his chest, something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but not guilt either. Just discomfort. He took another sip of his coffee, though it had gone cold. "Another one of those types," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "Think they own the damn city." He didn't notice the way the younger officers nearby paused their conversations as the man passed. He didn't see the way the desk sergeant hurried to attention inside the lobby, or how a few of the senior officers exchanged glances of nervous recognition. Ray only knew one thing. Whoever that man was, he wouldn't be parking in that spot again if he had anything to say about it. But deep down, a faint unease started to gnaw at him, the kind that whispered, "You might have just messed with the wrong man." The atmosphere inside the precinct changed the moment the man in the navy suit walked through the doors. A hum of tension rippled across the open room, low conversations dying mid-sentence, chairs scraping back, and the sharp shuffle of officers instinctively straightening their uniforms. It was the kind of silence that carried both curiosity and fear. Officer Ray Collins stepped in a few moments later, still irritated from the parking lot confrontation, still unaware of the storm he'd just walked into. He was muttering to himself about arrogant civilians when he realized everyone was standing at attention. Every head was turned toward the glass doors of the captain's office. And there he was, the same man, the one in the tailored navy suit. Only now he wasn't just another outsider. He was standing next to Captain Ramirez, who looked unusually nervous, her posture rigid. Her voice carried across the room with a formal tone that Ray hadn't heard in years. "Everyone," she began, glancing at the assembled officers, "I'd like to introduce you to our new chief of police, Chief Darius Freeman." The words hit like a thunderclap. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then came the shuffling of feet, the quiet murmurs of disbelief, the awkward attempts at salutes. Ray felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. His breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a curse. His hands, which had been resting casually on his belt, fell to his sides. He blinked once, twice. Surely he'd misheard. The man he'd just humiliated, spat near, couldn't possibly be his new boss. But as Chief Freeman's gaze swept across the room and landed on him, Ray knew. The sharp, steady eyes were the same. The calm composure hadn't changed. The quiet authority radiating from him now made Ray feel smaller than he ever had in his uniform. Freeman's expression gave nothing away. He didn't smirk, didn't glare, didn't seek revenge in his tone. He simply nodded once to the captain and began speaking. "It's an honor to be here," Freeman said, his voice deep, controlled, and steady. "I've followed this precinct's work for years. You've faced tough times and tough neighborhoods, and yet you've kept this city safe. I intend to make sure you keep doing that, only better." His words carried weight, but there was a certain edge in them, a firmness that commanded attention without raising volume. Every officer in the room was locked on him. Even the ones who'd been leaning back a minute ago were now standing tall. Ray, however, could barely hear a word. His mind was roaring with panic. He could feel his pulse thudding in his neck, a slow, sick rhythm of realization. The image of himself in the parking lot replayed over and over, his sneer, his words, the spit. Chief Freeman will be spending the next few days getting to know the department, Captain Ramirez continued. Please give him your full cooperation. Then Freeman stepped forward, breaking into a faint, professional smile. Before we get started, he said, glancing around the room, I'd like a quick word with Officer Collins. Every head turned toward Ray. The sound of his own name felt like a punch. Someone in the back muttered, "Oh, man," under their breath. Ray's throat went dry. He managed to choke out, "Yes, sir," and took a stiff step forward. Freeman didn't move for a moment. His eyes met Ray's, calm but firm. "In my office," he said simply. The walk across the precinct felt like miles. Ray could feel every stare, every smirk barely hidden behind hands and coffee cups. He didn't look at anyone. He just focused on the back of Freeman's suit as they entered the new chief's office, his office. The door closed behind them with a soft click, shutting out the world. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. The chief set down a folder on the desk, then turned to face him. He didn't sit, and he didn't ask Ray to. "Officer Collins," Freeman began evenly, "do you recognize me?" Ray swallowed hard. His tongue felt thick. "Yes, sir," he managed, voice barely above a whisper. "I thought so." Freeman's tone wasn't cruel, but it carried an unmistakable authority. "I like to think that first impressions matter in this line of work. Would you agree?" Ray nodded quickly, his face burning. "Good." Freeman crossed his arms, regarding him with quiet intensity. "Because what I saw this morning wasn't an officer maintaining order. It was a man using his badge as a weapon, against someone he didn't bother to understand." Ray wanted to defend himself. He wanted to say he didn't mean it, that he didn't know. But no words came. "I don't care that you didn't know who I was," Freeman continued. "That's not the point. The question is, would you have acted any differently if I wasn't the new chief?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Ray's shoulders slumped. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Finally, Freeman sighed softly, his tone shifting from steel to something quieter. This department needs change, Officer Collins. And whether you realize it or not, so do you. I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to make sure you, all of you, remember what this badge is supposed to mean. Ray nodded again, unable to meet his eyes. Now, Freeman said, moving to his desk, get back to work. We'll talk more later. Ray turned to leave, his hands trembling slightly. As he stepped out of the office, the noise of the precinct returned, faint murmurs, the clatter of keyboards, a few curious glances. But all he could hear was the echo of the chief's calm voice and the weight of his own shame pressing down on his chest. The door closed behind Ray with a soft click, and for a long moment, he just stood there in the hallway, staring at nothing. The sounds of the precinct washed over him, phones ringing, keyboards clattering, muted voices trading case notes, but it all felt distant, muffled, like he was underwater. His chest was tight, his palms damp. He'd been reprimanded before in his career, sure, captains, lieutenants, even an angry citizen or two, but this was different. Chief Freeman hadn't yelled, he hadn't cursed, he hadn't even raised his voice. Somehow, that made it worse. The quiet disappointment in his tone had cut deeper than any punishment ever could. Ray found himself wandering toward the break room without really meaning to. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the stale smell of burned coffee filled the air. A couple of younger officers glanced up as he walked in, then quickly looked away, pretending to busy themselves with the vending machine. Everyone knew what had happened, or at least, enough of it to start whispering. He poured himself a cup of coffee he didn't want and stood there, staring into it. His reflection trembled in the dark liquid, distorted and small. He'd always thought of himself as a good cop. Maybe a tough one, maybe blunt, but fair. He followed the rules, made his arrests, got results. He'd seen the worst of people. Addicts, thieves, men who'd beat their wives senseless, and somewhere along the way, he'd started seeing everyone like that. The job hardened him, made him skeptical, suspicious. That was survival. That's what he told himself. But now, the chief's words echoed in his head. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. It stung because it was true. He'd looked at a man, not a suspect, not a criminal, and decided, without thinking, that he didn't belong. He'd seen a black man in a suit and felt, what? Threatened, annoyed, superior. He wasn't sure anymore. The door to the break room opened behind him. Collins. Ray froze. It was Chief Freeman. He turned slowly, trying to stand straighter. Chief, he said, his voice rough. Freeman stepped inside, not unkindly, but with that same measured calm that seemed to command the air around him. Relax, officer. I'm not here to chew you out again. Ray nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. The chief leaned against the counter, folding his arms. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable exactly, but heavy with meaning. You've been here a long time, haven't you? Freeman said finally. 22 years, sir. That's a lot of time to see the city change. Ray let out a humorless chuckle. Change isn't always for the better. Freeman's gaze sharpened. Depends on what side of it you're standing on. Ray looked down, ashamed. You're right, sir. I was out of line. I can't take it back. No, Freeman said simply. You can't, but you can decide what you do next. Ray exhaled slowly, the weight in his chest shifting. If it means anything, I wasn't trying to. Freeman raised a hand, cutting him off. I know what you weren't trying to do. I'm more interested in what you learned. Ray hesitated. He wasn't a man who talked about feelings, not to his wife, not to his kids, and certainly not at work. But standing there, looking into the chief's calm, unflinching eyes, something inside him cracked a little. I learned that. Maybe I stopped seeing people, Ray admitted. Started seeing problems instead, like everyone's just one bad decision away from being a perp. I guess I forgot that some folks are just people. Freeman studied him for a long moment, then nodded. That's a start. He took a step closer, his tone softening. You've got experience, Collins. Men like you can still do good, if you're willing to change. This department doesn't need perfect cops. It needs better ones. Ray swallowed hard. I'll do better, Chief. I believe you, Freeman said quietly. Then, with a faint smile that carried no mockery, he added, but next time, maybe hold the coffee instead of the spit. Ray actually managed a small laugh, awkward, but genuine. The chief gave him a nod and turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. See you at roll call tomorrow. I expect you on time. Yes, sir. When Freeman left, the room felt different, lighter somehow. Ray sank into one of the chairs, rubbing a hand over his face. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like maybe he could be part of something worth fixing. He glanced down at his badge lying on the table beside his cup. The metal gleamed dully under the fluorescent light, not a symbol of authority anymore, but a reminder of what it was supposed to stand for. Respect, service, integrity. He took a long sip of the bitter coffee, grimaced, and muttered to himself, guess it's time to start living up to it. Outside, the day was brightening. The city buzzed on, unaware of the quiet shift happening inside one small precinct, and inside one man who, at last, had begun to understand what real duty meant.